Hello, everyone. I'm Eric D'Souza, and welcome to our continuing series of author interviews from Crime Writers of Canada's members who have been shortlisted for the Awards of Excellence. Today, I'm talking to Catherine Fogarty, who's been nominated for the Brass Knuckles Award for Best Nonfiction Crime Book, sponsored by Simpson and Wellenreicher, LLP, for her book, Murder on the Inside, the true story of the deadly riot at the Kingston Penitentiary, published by Biblioasis. So thank you for joining us today, Catherine. I know you're very busy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, I believe I pulled you out of your studio, your recording studio, for a little bit. And we'll talk about that near the end of the show.
Sure.
But first off, let's talk about the book.
Mhm.
So I'm going to blame my age on this one because the Kingston Riot happened before I was born. And everybody's going to have to pick up your book to get a real in-depth analysis of what happened. But could you give
Mhm.
us sort of the Coles notes of the event?
Yeah, the book is about the 1971 Kingston Penitentiary riot at obviously the notorious Kingston Pen, which is in Kingston, and it's Canada's oldest prison. It was built in 1835, and of course, has quite a reputation for what it was. It's since closed. It closed in 2013. So this story, yes, takes place over 4 days, starting in April of 1971. And we basically, go right into those days, starting on that first night and moments before the riot occurred. And then I take you through what happens inside and outside of the prison. There's a lot of historical information about the prison and how it had become the place that it was in 1971 and why the prisoners revolted at that point, and a lot of political issues that were at play at the time, etc. So it's a fascinating story, and when I found it, uh, I I was born before that, but I certainly had never heard of this story. And I think, as you had mentioned earlier about the fact that everybody has heard about Attica, and Attica happened in the same year, 5 months later. So, as Canadians, yeah, how do we know a lot about that story, but we'd never heard about this one, which was, the biggest prison riot in our history at the time. So that was really compelling to me, and I instantly wanted to know more about this story. So.
And it was deadly, right? Like long scenes of murder on the inside. So I can tell some people did die
Yes,
from it.
yes. That's it's definitely there's definitely murder in place. I don't want to give it away, but yeah, there's two people ended up dead, which is again, if we refer back to Attica, in Attica, I believe 39 people were killed. So one of the people that was involved in the story, a journalist by the name of Ron Haggart, who was in the prison trying to negotiate an end to the riot. He wrote a story after the riot called "Cool Heads Prevailed." And again, there are differences between Canadians and Americans, and this is maybe a little example of that cooler heads did prevail, although it was moments away from becoming a situation like Attica, because there was over 500 heavily armed military personnel on the outside, just waiting for the go ahead to attack the prison. So it could have
Well,
ended much worse. Yeah.
well, yes. Now I'm intrigued. So, at the very least, I'm gonna have to look this up on Wikipedia and
No,
to
that's
see what
cheating.
happened.
That's cheating. You got to read the book.
I need to know the end.
Yeah.
You were telling me before that obviously there was a lot of talk of prison reform
Mhm.
leading up to this riot. We're still talking about prison reform uh, 50 years now.
Yeah, 51 years now. Yeah.
Did anything happen from this event? Like after this, did anything improve for the prisoners, or was it all for nothing?
Uh, again, it's a delicate question. But yes and no. I mean, what's happened over the years with respect to prison reform in Canada, and what I found out in researching, that very topic is that it's been a push-pull kind of situation, and of course it relates to the particular government that's in place. So out of the riot at Kingston, yes, there were some reforms put in place, but it's almost like that, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, because any reforms that would be put in place, then yes, the next government would potentially come in and repeal those. So they after the riot, they initiated a report called the Swackhammer Report. And in that report, they had listed a number of reforms that should be put in place. And some were, but again, people aren't really watching what's happening in our prisons, as public, because we've always got a lot more going on. So again, there's a little bit of a sleight of hand that happens, that something might come into play, but then it can go away, and none of us are the wiser, because we're not on top of prison reform. So the one thing that did come out of the prison riot in 1971 was a new position called the officer of correctionals, the ombudsman investigator. So, and that position is still in place. And although that position is supposed to be a senior government official who oversees what is happening in the prison system, and then makes recommendations as to what should change. The Office of the Correctional Investigator, that's the official title. But again, that individual doesn't have authority to make those changes. He can only recommend them. And from what I see, the government says very politely, after he submits his report every year, thank you very much, and we'll take it under advisement. And then I think it goes in a drawer somewhere. So long story short, so many of the issues that they were talking about and rebelling against in 1971, we're still talking about 51 years later, like the overuse of solitary confinement, things like that.
I think that was just the second question I asked you, and I already know just from those 2 questions that you really know yourself and did your research.
Mm-hmm.
What drew you to this story? Like, why did you put so much time and effort into it? Was it just prison reform, or was it just history in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination. It's historically, I think it's a very important story for Canadians and for Canada to learn about, because again, what I found about Corrections Canada is that it's a very opaque, secretive organization. So they have generally governed and managed without any kind of external oversight, because absolutely, we all have many other things to be thinking about. So the more I looked into this story, this historical story of 1971, and discovering and realizing that we haven't come that far in prison reform, I was shocked, and so that's what really kept me wanting to dig further and further. And as well, when I approached Corrections Canada, and they shut the door very quickly on my face, then again I was compelled to keep digging. So off I went.
Now that you've done all this digging and made it easy for us, I am going to have to read your book. You got me hooked, so thank you.
Yeah.
I researched you a little bit and found very quickly an extensive career in television production. Did that help? Because I know this is your first book also. So did that open some doors for you and make things a little bit easier?
Yeah, again, yes and no. I think what it was for me is that working in television, I've been writing for television for many, many years, writing scripts, writing proposals for new ideas, etc. So I had a writing background, but again, it was in a very different genre. And I had never really anticipated that I would be writing a book, but a few years before the book was published, I started taking creative writing courses, because I wrote so much for my work. I thought, you know what, I just want to write for myself. So I took all different courses in, creative writing, and then kind of fell into creative nonfiction. And as soon as I took that course through University of Toronto, I knew that that was the kind of writing that I wanted to do, historical nonfiction. So that led me to an MFA at King's in Halifax, and as part of that program, it's a wonderful, great 2-year program. But you have to have a book proposal in place. And so I thought, I don't really have a book proposal, but I had literally found this story about the riot in the Globe and Mail on an anniversary date. And I'd cut out this little piece of paper and I put it in what I always call my ideas file. And again, there's no rhyme or reason to that. It's just, I'll see something in a paper or a magazine and it tweaks my interest. So I'll cut it out and I put it in that file. So when I had to do a book proposal, I thought, you know what, let me look into that story. So, a few years later, here we are.
It's apropos that we're going to talk about your podcast, because clearly you're a story hunter. So, and obviously a history buff. So this
Yeah.
book is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to you telling us about true crime. What can you tell us about your podcast, the Story Hunter Podcast?
Well, when just prior to the pandemic, so we're looking back, early 2020, actually 2019, so I'd finished the book and it was being edited. And I realized that, as I said earlier, that this was the genre that I really wanted to stay in. And I had been listening to podcasts, true crime podcasts, and absolutely loved them. And for many years, I've been, Friday night is Dateline night, so don't talk to me. So it was definitely a passion. So I thought, you know what, why don't I started thinking about putting together a podcast. And then the pandemic hit. And in our television production company, we all had to go home. We had to shut down our production and we had to go home. So I thought, you know what, this is the perfect time to launch a podcast, because I can do everything from home. And I had a recording studio in my office, but I could go into that studio, and my producer was in a room attached to that, so we actually never even interacted. So it just worked out that it was perfect for a very strange time at the beginning of COVID. So that was in June of 2020. We launched our first episode, and today I was just in recording our 52nd episode.
Wow.
So it's been busy. It's been a whirlwind, but I really enjoy it because I'm finding these incredible stories that I really enjoy, all Canadian, that I really enjoy retelling.
They're all Canadian?
All Canadian, yeah. What the stories
Phil
are?
Hartman was Canadian, right?
Yes, that's right. So they're either actually take place in Canada, or it's about a Canadian that may have run into some murder and mayhem elsewhere. So yes, I do several that take place in Los Angeles, like the murder of Dorothy Stratton and Phil Hartman, who was actually, he was from Woodstock, Ontario. So. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but there is always a Canadian connection.
A Canadian connection. That's great, because we as Canadians have to learn our history a little bit more, even the dark.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah.
Great. Well, I've already signed up to your podcast, and now
wonderful.
I'm gonna go and buy your book so I get to read it. It was a pleasure meeting you, Catherine.
Thank you.
I think it was a lot of fun, and good luck. May 26th is actually coming up pretty soon. You're on a good competitive list of people there, and I think all the books are fantastic. So being shortlisted with those names is pretty cool.
It certainly is. Yeah, it's quite an honor, and it was a lovely surprise. I think it came in on a Friday morning, and I'm like, oh, just made my weekend. So so that was terrific. And yes, thank you very much.
Great. Once again, thanks for meeting you. Thanks for talking with us today. And to everyone out watching, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.